Coming to you from the home of Franklin's finest, this is the APB Podcast. Here now is Franklin Police Public Information Manager, Max Winitz.
It is episode 19 of the APB Podcast. Great as always to have you with us, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Today's show titled The Detective, and we are sitting down with Detective Craig Wright. He is the second longest serving detective here at the Franklin Police Department, a fascinating guy. We're going to talk to him about how he got his start, some of his memorable cases, and what it takes to become a detective at a police department. That conversation in just a couple of minutes, but first, let's get to the news headlines. We want to remind everybody that stop means stop. When you see a school bus with its stop arm extended and those red lights flashing, you must stop. It's the law here in Tennessee. Passing a stopped school bus isn't just a traffic violation. It puts children's lives at risk as they cross the street to get on or off the bus. Now, penalties include fines ranging from $250 to $1,000. And if a child is injured, well, the consequences can rise to a felony charge. Every school day, Franklin families trust the drivers will do the right thing, so let's do our part. Slow down, pay attention, and stop for those school buses. And the Franklin Police Department is proud to announce the promotion of 5 of its officers, recognizing their outstanding service, leadership, and dedication to the community. Captain Clayton Cates was promoted from training lieutenant. Lieutenant Bobby Dilworth was promoted from patrol sergeant. He now leads the flex unit. Sergeant Wes Brooks was promoted from detective. He now serves in patrol. Detective Mike Oliver was promoted from Master Patrol Officer, and Master Patrol Officer Ryan Lanke was promoted from Patrol Officer. Congratulations to those 5 great individuals. When we come back, our conversation with Detective Craig Wright. That's next.
Are you ready to make a difference in your community? The Franklin Police Department is seeking dedicated, passionate individuals who want to protect and serve in the South's most charming town. As a member of our internationally accredited team, you'll be part of a dynamic, supportive department that values integrity, professionalism, and community engagement. Enjoy competitive benefits, career advancement opportunities, and the chance to truly impact the safety and well-being of our neighbors. For more information, visit franklintn.gov/joinfpd. That's franklintn.gov/joinfpd.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Max Winitz here, being joined by Detective Craig Wright with the Franklin Police Department. Very excited to have you on the podcast and have the conversation with you today.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
You are one of our longest-serving detectives in CID, the Criminal Investigations Division. So, again, very interested to pick your brain a little bit about that world and what you all do on a daily basis. But first, tell me a little bit about you, your upbringing, and to the present point we're at today.
Okay. So I was born Fayetteville, North Carolina, 1970. I guess technically be Fort Bragg because I'm a military brat.
Yeah.
My dad's retired first sergeant, but I was born on the military base, Fort Bragg. So when you say Fayetteville, you got to say Fort Bragg, Fayetteville. I guess it's Fort Liberty. I don't know if they flip-flop now.
Right.
So growing up, just normal, didn't even think about law enforcement, just grew up, wanted to be that professional athlete. I played basketball, was real good at that, real good at football. So grew up playing 3 sports, the high school, elementary. So middle and junior high, I guess it's called middle school now, but back then, kind of telling my age, back then it was called junior high. So you had junior high and high school. So wound up getting a scholarship for football. I had to choose between football and basketball with Lenore Ryan College in North Carolina or football with Virginia Military Institute. So I wound up going to Lexington, Virginia, played football for them for 2 years.
Would you say you were better at football than basketball growing up?
No, I would say, and everybody else would say, I was better in basketball, but a lot of people said they saw the potential for me to go further in football. Love basketball. I mean, I ate, slept it. I mean, that's all I love to do is basketball.
Sure,
But
and you're in Fayetteville. You're an hour and a half or so from Wilmington, where Michael Jordan's from.
Yes.
You know, that connection
Yeah,
there.
yeah. Matter of fact, during one of our camps while we were in high school, before Michael Jordan became a pro, he officially became a pro. I forgot what the year was, but he was at Campbell University, and we was at a camp, and he was talking about how he was going to be. He already said that he was going to be a superstar. While he's in North Carolina, saying he's going
Yeah.
to the pros.
Yeah.
So it was amazing watching him and learning from him and stuff. I was at that point in my life. But yeah, I wound up going. My natural talents was football, so played football for Virginia Military Institute for 2 years. Transferred, went to Western Carolina University, and finished my football career. So near the end, after football, I still had another year before I can graduate. So I wound up helping as an assistant coach for the girls basketball team there at Western Carolina. And that's when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do, after college. I had to wind up getting a criminal justice degree, but I didn't know if I really wanted to go into law enforcement until I started watching a television show called Cops. And that's when Cops got just hitting television and became super popular. And then I'm watching it and I'm like, I can do that. I can see me doing that. So I was dating a woman who is now my wife, Roselle, in Chattanooga. And while I was working in Chattanooga with her, while she was finishing her master's, and I applied for Chattanooga Police Department. I was working as a substitute teacher and working nights at Red Foods there in Chattanooga until I finally got the opportunity, passed the test there, did the interview with the chief there, Chief Cochran, rest his soul. That was a unique interview because, if you watch the old television shows, even the new television shows, they're still kind of the same. When you go in front of the interview or you go in front of interrogations, you see the light because of the mood. They'll make the light dark and they'll have like a spotlight on.
Kind of like it is right now.
Yes,
with this
spotlight
light on you. Yeah.
But then, back then you can the cinematic view was like you have the bowl with the cigarette lit and the
Yeah.
smoke. That was like real life when I was going for my interview. So I was like, I sat down. I was like, I don't know if I'm here for an interview for a police officer. Or I'm being interrogated for a crime. So that kind of softened the mood. And then I got the job with Chattanooga Police Department. Worked patrol for 2.5, almost 3 years. And then myself and my wife got married. And I had a friend, John Brown, who was a police officer here in Chattanooga, and said, hey, why don't you come to Franklin? They're looking for police officers. Applied here. They initially wanted me to, they gave me the job before my wedding. My wedding was June 28th. And so they wanted to hire me before June 28th. And I was like, it was like kind of chaotic trying to get the wedding together and all that, trying to figure out how to move before the wedding. So I turned it down at first, and I said, hey, if you can keep me on the list, I'll greatly appreciate it. Literally the day after my wedding, they called me while we were on honeymoon. It's like, hey, job's still open if you want it. And I was like, yeah, sure, I'll come. I'll be there as soon as I can. So got hired August 25th.
Okay.
And
So you get married, you get this great news on the honeymoon, a perfect time.
Yeah. My wife wound up getting a job here because she's a teacher. Wound up getting a job here as a teacher. So, life was really good. Between Chattanooga and Franklin, it was like a pay raise for me too. So I got it was like a $7,000 pay raise. So everything was going good.
So that was 28 years ago.
Yes.
Hard to believe.
Hey, every time I go to court and testify in court, usually when I have to testify, when any law enforcement goes in front of a jury to testify, they have to introduce themselves, say who they work for and how long they work for. Just recently, 3 weeks ago, I had to testify in court on a theft case, and went through the spiel. And when it came to years working with Franklin, I said 28, and then I kind of paused, and I was like, oh, man, 28 years. And everybody in the audience started laughing.
Yeah, it's almost 3 decades.
Yes.
So I'm curious, you mentioned Cops was kind of the influence. When you started doing patrol in real life, did you say to yourself, okay, granted, Cops is not scripted, but did you know then you made the right decision, or did you say to yourself, okay, it's not really like what I see on that show?
Once I got started, I went, through their training program, what they call field training program. Once I got comfortable about the reports and how I wrote the report, because before computers were involved, all the reports had to be handwritten. And it had to be legible, so you couldn't write a report and it looked like a doctor's signature page. So once I got comfortable with that, then I knew I always knew I could deal with people, because during my life growing up, and my dad being military, so we traveled a lot, because he had to do what they call tours. As in the military, you got to do a tour, and one your tours or 2 year tours have to be outside of the U.S. So our first tour as a family, we went to Panama and spent 3.5 years in Panama. So, dealing with cultures and different backgrounds there kind of helped me learn how to, adapt with talking to other people and dealing with other people. So me, I was naturally, because the way my parents raised me, I was naturally a person that was approachable. So I didn't have no problem making friends there, learning stuff, and also vice versa. Sometimes in Panama, Spanish speaking language. So while I'm getting immersed in Spanish, I'm also helping them with English.
Sure.
And then we came back home. My dad, before he retired, had to do another tour, and he did it in Germany. Well, he did a couple of conflicts. They call them he calls them conflicts. The military don't call them wars, because nobody wins in a war. So he calls them conflicts. He did Desert Storm before he got married, before I was born and my sister was born. He fought in the Vietnam War, and the two Iraqi War and the Desert War. He did that before he went to Germany, and then that's when I was in college at VMI. And I wanted to go visit him in Germany for about a week, and that was fun. I enjoyed that. It was cold because it was during the it was right after football season, so it was during like winter time. So,
did he ever talk to you about enlisting or even getting into a career in law enforcement growing up?
No, my dad is the type of person where he says, your choices are your choices. He's here to help, build me up to be, a productive person in life. Teaches us right. My mom teach me right from wrong, but he understands. He's like, look, the choices you make, good or bad, you there's a consequence to that choice. So you want to, at least when you make choices, you might want to make good choices. So the outcome is a better outcome than it is when you're back, with the wrong choice or bad choice. Something bad is going to happen. You just hope it doesn't happen to you. Do you want to, what he raised me is like, do you want to take a chance on not getting the worst consequences from your bad choices?
Yeah.
So
take me through your path becoming a detective. As I mentioned earlier, you've been with CID 12 years, but overall here at the department, close to 30. So when did that start to interest you in becoming a detective here?
I was one of the late bloomers when it came to investigations, because I enjoyed patrol so much because the different avenues of what I did with patrol. I was like a drug, what they call a drug recognition expert. I got really good at DUI arrests. So I wanted to, enhance my education with dealing with impaired drivers. So it was this course called the Drug Recognition Expert course, where now you become more of an expert of not only locating impaired drivers, but what type of substance they may be impaired by. Mm-hmm. So enjoyed that. I always, grow up in life. I'm not going to say that I was the perfect kid. I did hang out with a lot of people that was on the other side of the law that took the bad choices. Yeah. So I learned about that lifestyle and what it involves with drugs or committing crimes. I learned that. Never participated, but I knew what they were doing. So when I got on the streets and I confronted people that their bad choices was consistent with my friends' bad choices, then I knew how to articulate that in court and stuff, and wound up getting a lot of drug arrests and arrests involving thefts of cars and stuff. But what happened, I think I was on patrol in Franklin, I want to say about 15 years. I think it was close to 15 years. One of the detectives, Carlos Martin, who's now with the ATF, he asked me, he's like, hey, what do you think about being a detective? That's like, being that I've been with patrol so long and been, with law enforcement years, I said, don't y'all want some young people in there? Y'all don't want my old self in there. And he's like, no, everybody, when they came to asking, especially with drugs, when I came to investigations, I started with narcotics first because I was with the drug task force. They originally recruited me for the drug task force. He says, every time we ask somebody about who would be a good fit for the drug task force on narcotics, my name was number one. But they also said, they put an asterisk mark, like a little caveat. They said, you got to convince Craig to do it because he may not want to do it. Mm-hmm. So when they talked to me about it, I said, look, let me talk to my family because I had two girls then. And usually when I make decisions involving law enforcement, I got to make sure it fits the family dynamic. And that's when I was a field training officer here in Franklin, I always tell people I'm training, it's like, look, you don't have to do everything that's given to you. Make sure if you got a family, make sure it fits your family dynamic because, divorce is high among law enforcement. And a lot of times when divorce comes about, it's because, when you get married, nobody really understands the lifestyle of law enforcement officer, and sometimes it makes it difficult to understand the lifestyle of your spouse. Mm-hmm. So when you get married and you're in law enforcement, make sure both of y'all have an understanding what it really involves. Sometimes it involves a lot of not just long hours, but odd hours. Times are different. You got different shifts. Yeah. When you get into specialized units, sometimes you get called out in the middle of the night, or the times are varied from day to day. And if your wife or your spouse has an understanding that, you also reciprocate that. It's like, understand, look, it's not all just me as law enforcement. You sharing a life with somebody else, so you got to understand and be able to accommodate for your spouse's time and efforts that she did on their profession. Mm-hmm. Then everything starts to flow a lot better. And that's what the thing with me and my wife, we always discuss what advantages or disadvantages this new ladder in our professional life. And I told her about it's like, hey, they really want me to consider about the narcotics. And at that time, our two daughters was high school level. So she said, yeah, just, go for it. We'll make it work. Yeah. Let your kids know what's going on. And that sometimes there are going to be times where I may not be able to attend the events they were involved or activities, because that was one thing we did all the time. We made sure we was involved in all the activities. Yeah. So they understood that. They both of them kind of enjoyed that, me as that detective, because I went to the drug task force. I was a narcotics detective. So they enjoyed the undercover aspects of it, because they see they're all about action type movies, and sometimes you got that undercover agent that's trying to break up the.
So they saw you as a James Bond, Dick Tracy.
Oh, they loved that, especially when I had to have an undercover name. It was so funny because I would attend events, especially when my oldest one played volleyball. So and I can say now, my undercover name they gave me because I had to them pick it. My wife picked it. It was Dwayne Johnson because she loves The Rock. so she every time I attend the games, my oldest daughter is like, "Hey, Dwayne," and stuff. And so I just waved back, and then her teammates was like, "Why? Your dad's name's not Dwayne. Why are you calling him Dwayne?" And she had to tell him, it's like, when he working, I had to call him by his undercover name. I can't call him by his real name. So they love that. And so I know I got off task, but finally accepted the job with the 21st Judicial District Drug Task Force. Was done with 2.5 years, and then promotions came up for detective and sergeant. I tested for both of them. Wound up getting detective. When I got detective, went straight to narcotics. And then been with narcotics, I think I did narcotics, 5 years before, 5 or 6 years before I transferred and went to major crimes.
Yeah, and I should have mentioned earlier that you are part of the Major Crimes Division in CID. Explain for the viewers and listeners the difference between major crimes and SVU, special victims. Yeah.
So, all right. So, major crimes handles violent crimes, like more like murders or aggravated assaults, property crimes, regular thefts like theft from buildings, where like all the shoplifters, especially the organized ones where they group together and steal stuff. Burglaries from vehicles, burglary from residences, fraud crimes. Fraud is so big here in Williamson County, and just a small piece. I probably won't be able to name all the type of frauds, but crimes where identity theft is involved, where victims somehow their information is getting intercepted via internet or through the mailbox, and the person is pretending to be them to buy houses or buy cars or buy property or open up bank accounts to get loans. We have other frauds where the person is pretending to be a company, say like a mortgage company. You're going to buy a house and you're making a down payment. Somehow in your email conversations with the realtor, that person has a phishing email that intercepts that conversation, and then they pretend to be the mortgage company and convinces you to send your down payment or your closing costs to the fake mortgage company, not the real company.
Right.
So we get those type of frauds. There's other frauds, romance scam frauds. We get those a lot, where the person is from overseas, falls in love, or makes the person that that he or she is talking to fall in love with them. Never met them. All their conversation is either maybe phone call, but most of the time email type. You don't physically get to talk to them like FaceTime, or if they do send a picture, they send a picture that's more likely not them. And they convince them to either send their own money to the person that's overseas, or they already romance. They're scamming another person and having them put their money into the other person, their scammers account, and they get the money.
There's so many scams.
Oh, it's like it's when I started doing fraud cases, I started getting a lot of fraud cases when I went to major crimes. It was amazing. I think fraud overall is probably $1 billion business.
Wow.
And it's rough. I'm trying to figure out what other major crime cases we get: fraud, property theft, violent crimes. I think that's about it. And special victims. Yeah, special victims. They deal with crimes against people. Most of the time it's domestic cases that turn, really seriously violent, or sexual crimes, either involving the youth, juveniles, or children, or adult sex crimes. The other type of crimes is special victim crimes involving pornographic material being passed. Or one common thing was at the malls, not as much as used to be, where suspects would go up and down escalators or in bathrooms and videotape people up their dress or anything like that.
So of all the major crimes that you mentioned, is there a particular one you enjoy investigating more than others?
The fraud crimes that involve identity theft. When somebody's stealing somebody's identity to be somebody else, I enjoy that. It's labor intensive because it involves a lot of, you got to make sure that the person's identity is not the real person, and then you just got to follow the trail of paperwork where they're using phone calls to call to buy this, or they create a bank account, and you got to find out where they created a bank account to get to that person. So it's a puzzle piece when it comes to fraud-related crimes, especially when it's involving identity theft, because you got to make sure all those pieces fit, so it leads you to that particular suspect and not divert it into another direction and stuff.
And a lot of times these suspects are overseas, correct?
Oh yeah. I think I see mine's about 55% of the fraud cases I have is probably majority of them are overseas.
Wow.
The companies are now being real cognizant about the victims, protecting the victim's identity. So now it's making it harder for people overseas to capture other people's identity and do their overseas crimes. So what they'll do is recruit somebody in the United States to do it, and then filter the money via wire transfer to them. So the person who catches the blunt of the consequences is the person in the United States.
Yeah.
And the overseas person won't get it, because unless they're in an extradition or a country that can extradite, nobody can touch them.
Yeah. So take me through a typical day for you, from the time you come in to the time you leave at night. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I assume every day is different. Is that an accurate statement?
Yes, yeah, definitely. Most of the time, when I come to work, I'm trying to make sure I try to get my cases organized from most important to least important. And all the cases are important, but not as that needs direct importance, like immediate attention, as the other cases.
Fair to say a homicide sort of outweighs a credit card?
Yeah, or a vehicle burglary.
Sure.
Yeah. So,
but let me reiterate: every case is important to you and every one of those guys.
Yes.
At CID.
Yes.
Regardless of what it is.
That's correct. Yeah, and I let all my victims know that, like, hey, you are important to me, but I have to pay more attention to this because of the type of crime it's related to. So once I get those sorted out, which ones I need to get done, I try to, and it makes it hard on me too, I try to get the cases that I know I can clear up real fast. I try to get them out of the way first. But that usually, it winds up falling to the wayside because I got to deal with the high priority cases first. Well, I know then I'm getting a bunch of emails, and so I'm trying to answer all emails that come in. Every once in a while I'm working on reports, I'll get phone calls, and I try to address the needs of the person on the phone call, because all of them are law enforcement related. Maybe it may be an outside jurisdiction, or it may be something within the county itself, Williamson County itself. Try to help them out, and then with cases that I know I can close or that I know I have a suspect, then the choice is, is the need to take warrants out on that suspect, how you say, priority, where I need to get the warrants now. Like if it was a murder, I'm not gonna let a murderer walk around the streets. They're gonna have to arrest him right then. Mm-hmm. But if it's somebody dealing with identity theft, like the fraud cases, those cases we can send it to the grand jury and let the grand jury decide if my case I investigated have enough merit to take warrants out on them. And then I can deal with the courts upstairs, circuit court upstairs, general sessions is downstairs. And then most of the time, general sessions is mostly for misdemeanor stuff, but sometimes you have to arrest people for felony situations, but you have to go through the general sessions court to move it upstairs, in which they call it binding the case over.
So you could speak for all of your detectives, or you can speak for yourself, but I'm curious to know how much of your day, percentage-wise, is spent in the office, checking emails, making phone calls, going through files, versus out and about, interviewing witnesses face-to-face, being out at the scene of a crime. What's sort of the percentage of how much time you're here versus out and about in the field?
Before there was ability to communicate faster with outside agencies, I would say about 60-70% of our time was out in the field, because when it dealt with cases outside of Williamson County, we may not be able to contact that agency. We may have to physically go over there to maybe collect evidence or receive certain type of documents than we do now. Now, we have the ability to communicate with agencies all across, not only the United States, but outside of the United States, and stuff can be sent via secure mail or links and stuff that are protected by, IT and stuff. So now I say maybe we field stuff maybe 40%, and then 60% we're in the office, because a lot of times now we can handle stuff outside that we would normally go outside to go and get inside, because we can communicate via email, secure email, face-to-face time, or through electronic means. Mm-hmm.
Is there a case or cases that stand out to you when somebody asks you, what's been the most rewarding part of your job? What stands out, if there's a case or cases that you can think of?
How much time you got?
All right, let's focus on one specific case then.
I'll start with narcotics division, or before even narcotics division. The Franklin Police Department has they have a unit called the Special Investigations Unit, which is more their immediate action team type of unit, where if problems go on in Franklin or in Williamson County that need immediate attention, then Special Investigations gets on it. Well, before that, it was called the Community Action Team. And myself and a couple other officers, about 3 other officers, were involved in the Community Action Team. And we addressed everything that needed to be done right in Franklin. If there was, most of it was just drug issues or issues about violence in certain areas. So when we first was when the Community Action Team was developed, we went out in the streets, and the very first, as soon as we got out on the streets, we got involved with stopping the vehicle that was suspicious. We suspected probably DUI, because we was en route to actually another one of the local bars that was always giving problems. It was always bar fights, or there was drug stuff going on. So while I was en route there, we saw this vehicle that looked like it was possibly DUI, and we get out with them, and we wound up, while talking to them, We smelled marijuana, found out, I think he had about 4 or 5 pounds of marijuana in the car. And back then, community action team, let's see, I think that was about 13 years ago. So to us, I mean, that was a big thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we just developed this unit, and first day we're out here, we're getting the person that's got 4 pounds of marijuana. When marijuana was a big thing, not as big now, and then finding all this money on them, and he had a nice car, so we was like, oh man, this is awesome. So we were super stoked about that, and how the community action team was going to go forth and combating crime in Franklin.
Yeah.
There's crime, not only just any type of crime, but just crime that needed immediate attention.
Yeah.
So that was super. That I remember that well. Once I got with the drug unit, the drug task force. I'm sorry. When I got with the drug task force, then there was this particular stop where our highway unit that does what they call highway interdiction got out with a trailer that had a couple of cars on there, and based on their training, sometimes when they're out of state like that and they only got 2 cars and not a whole fleet of cars, it attracted their attention. At that point, I think they found heroin in the car, but they needed extra assistance with the vehicle because they felt this specific vehicle, may be carrying more drugs or money. So we got out with and helped him on that. Took it to the bay. They got a search warrant for it. We're trying to find anything about it. Didn't look it at first look. If you look at the car, nothing looked unusual about it. But then during the search warrant, we started noticing imperfections in the car. It was like, man, this hump in the dashboard don't look something's wrong with it. Or there were bolts in the back seat. You can tell that it was brand new bolts, and the welding work was like brand new.
Yeah.
So come to find out, in the dashboard was large sums of money. We finally got in there, and then when they got the bolts taken apart, there was a compartment built, and there was more heroin and money. So after we pulled everything out of both cars, we found out there was $1.5 million and about, I think, 3 kilos of heroin in the car. So that was a big thing. I think that is the most money on a seizure that I was been involved in. Most of the time, my seizures, it may be like 30, 40,000, and I get excited about that.
So this cash is just all over the car?
Yeah, all inside the car in different compartments and everything. That was awesome because the guy was scared because he was moving money for the cartel, and he needed protection. Once we found out, he needed protection because he knew he was going to get murdered if they found out that money got seized.
So it sounds like the narcotics cases stand out to you.
They do. Once I went to major crimes, the second case I got handled in major crimes was a fraud case, and happened to be this person that was going places to places with counterfeit checks, basically checks that were legitimate from companies, but if something was written on it, there's a special type of liquid that you can wipe it away and then put your own stuff in there.
Yeah.
So he was taking and buying a lot of four-wheelers. Some people call them side-by-sides. I call them a car because when I found out how much the prices are for these four-wheelers, I was like, that's the price of a car, anywhere from I saw $18,000 side-by-sides to $30,000 side-by-sides. I was like, man, these are actual cars.
Yeah.
That became a big deal once I caught him trying to sell a side-by-side. He was actually coming back from Alabama where he stole a car, not a car, but a side-by-side. And I got, through my narcotics connections, developed very good, confidential informants that later on trust me so much that when they, completed their task, they kept in touch with me. either they'll kept in touch with me to tell me, hey, thank you for, looking out for me when I going on that wrong path, or they'll come in and give me some tips. This one was a tip that happened to blend in with my case. He was giving me a tip about a stolen side by side coming in. He didn't realize it was connecting to my case, and then once I heard the person who was selling it, we wound up setting up a deal to buy it, and we arrested him, and I got him to confess about but within the Middle Tennessee area, also I think in Ohio and South. The Florida, Mississippi area, he was probably moving. He said legitimately moving $3 million to $4 million worth of stolen product, where he was just doing straight up fraud with buying with fake checks and everything. Because when we caught him, we also caught the printer he was using to make the fake checks, the photocopier where he was making all these multiple IDs with all the different victims' names. So that was big right there.
What's it feel like to get a bad guy like that off the street?
That was how you say it, that was exhausting and exhilarating at the same time, because it took a whole lot just to get to catch him, because he evaded law enforcement for so long with the different identities. Nobody could really, put one to one together. And then there was a certain picture on him with his tattoo on his neck. And we was able to communicate with the department in Mississippi, who recognized that tattoo and said, "Hey, that's this person." And once we knew it was that person, then our target was to try to find out where he was at. And it just, good luck. Opportunity came by with this confidential informant I had in the past, had brought me information about this dude who was my guy I was looking for. And once he got caught, it was, he was giving up everything.
Yeah. So the Peggy Cox case remains the only unsolved homicide in the city of Franklin. That happened back in 1991. No doubt we'll have a podcast that focuses on that case. But long story short, just about everybody knows, but she is an employee at Hardee's, and she's gunned down while taking an order in the drive-through line. I'm not so curious about the details of that case. What I am curious to know is, what does it say about this department, specifically the detectives in this department, that there is only one unsolved homicide in the city of Franklin? What does that say about your work ethic and CID as a whole?
It lets the citizens know that when cases come across our desk or anything that comes into the Franklin Police Department, they pay attention to it, and they also they work, tirelessly to try to find the person involved and put him in jail, and where he's supposed to be. And the citizens loves that, because they know crime is out there, but they know Franklin Police Department is going to solve the cases if it's presented to them, because that's what we do, and that's what the chief hires people that can think, and not robots when it comes to law enforcement, and can, if they don't know one way to catch that person, they analytically can go different directions and get to that source. So it speaks to the citizens. They feel a whole lot safer that cases could be solved when involved with certain types of crimes.
And I know that's not your case, but what would it mean to all of you back there to finally get that one solved?
Oh man, just for us, the people that's retired that invested into it, that'll be like almost like a silver lining for us. It's like, hey, this one case that's been eluding us for years is now being solved. That a lot of people would definitely, if they weren't drinkers, they would have a drink.
Yeah.
But that's one case, and we never have pushed that case to the side.
Right.
Somebody's always looking at that case. We always receiving information about the case, tips here and there, and we follow those leads. Then that, I think the citizens know about that too. And
So it's not considered a cold case by any means.
no, it may be titled a cold case, but it's not. It's somebody either every day or every other day is trying to find, they look at the case and try to find something in there, because it's always going to be something. You just got to find it. It's just not as not easily visible than some other cases.
Yeah.
So it'll be super. I know I'll be super stoked once we find the
For
person.
sure. Yeah. Wrapping up, what advice would you have for somebody who's young, who wants to get into law enforcement, but specifically wants to focus on becoming a detective, somebody who, enjoys solving mysteries, helping others? What would you say to them?
You know what? Because my daughter, my youngest one, she wants to be in law enforcement. She wants to do the federal side.
Okay.
And I tell her, it's like, look, if you want to get into law enforcement, which is, I would never tell anybody not to do it. But I told them, it's like, look, you need to be more aware than you're normally aware, because that's one thing about law enforcement, period, is that the ability to remember what happened on a case, how you got to the case, and when you come to reporting, to be able to put down the stuff that you was able to collect and put it in a report that anybody can understand it, and not cut corners around it, because you can't, in courts or just in law enforcement, period, nobody can read the person's mind, the investigator's mind or the officer's mind about what was done. They only know what they read. And so you got to make sure that you have everything that you know about the case and put it down. So your memory is paramount. How you deal with people is paramount. Public speaking, I told them, if you can get public speaking classes, get into that, because you're gonna have to talk to groups, especially as a detective. A lot of times we have our public information officer that does all that, but it may be a point in time where you have to talk to a group of law enforcement officers, especially about the Peggy Cox thing, so you can get a roundabout consensus from everybody about their involvement. Maybe they can help out with the case. So learn how to talk with people, learn how to speak in public, learn how to speak to people, because sometimes what you say can determine how, information comes back to you. And overall, exercise, be fit, and have an outlet. I always tell people, have an outlet once you're done working, because this job can consume you, and it has physically eaten people's health. So health is trying to keep your mind right, keeping your body in shape, helps you with the longevity of a professional career in law enforcement.
So finally, 3 decades later, almost 3 decades later, I guess you made the right decision, I assume you would say, and you have cops to thank for that, the TV show.
Yes, I did. Yeah, literally, Cops is the one that got me excited to do law enforcement.
Had you not been interested in police work, what do you think you would have been doing? NFL
Probably
career?
two things. No, because I was getting pulled hamstrings. I could have. A lot of people really thought I could play NFL.
Yeah.
But when I started getting hamstring pulls and getting all these high ankle strains that was almost tears, it got to the point where it was like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to, have a long life as a professional athlete.
Yeah.
And then, people tell you the reality of professional sports. It's not a easily obtained type of goal.
Sure.
So you need that education. So that everybody based on education. So I probably, if law enforcement was a part of my career, I probably would have done something business wise, or I'd have probably been in the military like my dad.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate your time. This was very interesting, insightful. Anything else at all you want to add about your career that I didn't ask you about?
No. I think you got everything. I think if you probably asked me some more stories of my career,
Yeah,
we'd have been here a long
if
time.
we had all the time in the world, I'd love to hear more about some of these cases you've worked on.
Yeah, no, but I enjoyed this. I thank you for inviting
Appreciate
me.
it. Detective Craig Wright, thank you very much. And thank you for joining us. We will see you next time. Stay safe, everybody.